Welcome to the library's Lunch and Learn session on peer review. The Lunch and Learn program is an ongoing series of mini lectures on a variety of research-based topics and databases. Please check the Lunch and Learn page at library.rrc.ca for more information. Let's get started. Also known as refereeing, peer review is an important part of the article publication process. As students, you will often be asked to limit your searches to peer-reviewed articles. This session will help you understand what a peer-reviewed article is, how to find them, and how to identify them in the wild. Today's objectives include: what is peer review and how does it work? How do we identify peer-reviewed journals? How do we find peer-reviewed articles? And a bit about predatory journals. If you're interested in the PowerPoint guiding this session, it can be downloaded from this address. Please note that it is case sensitive. To get the most from this presentation, please access the speaker notes. The speaker notes are extensive and will contain additional information and links to related documents. Peer review, or refereeing, is a publication process applied to both primary articles and secondary or review articles, whereby independent experts within the field review or vet an article before it's published. This process ensures that the article meets the identified standard before it's published and improves the quality of papers overall. Through the review process, we can trust that the article is more likely to be valid and reach logical conclusions. Peer review is a lengthy and highly competitive process. It can take up to a year to complete, and very few manuscripts are successful. It is important to understand that just because an article is successful doesn't mean that it is correct or conclusive, or even that the reviewers agree with the conclusions, just that it met the standards specified by the journal. Here's the process in a nutshell. Researchers have an idea or theory or a hypothesis that they want to explore. They complete their research, and they write their paper. They submit the paper to the journal editor or publisher. The editor sends the paper to the reviewers, and the reviewers will send it back to the editor with approval, request for revisions, or rejection. Once the publisher approves, it gets published. The details of the review process can vary from publisher or publication. It may take a bit of digging. Often you will find information about the peer review process described in the Information for Authors section on the publication's webpage. Let's take a look at an example. This statement on this slide was taken from the Journal of Nursing Education's website. In this example, from what we can see in the journal's process includes a double-blind review, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide, that the editors act as the middleman between the reviewers and the authors. Authors cannot talk directly to the reviewers. And only one revision cycle is allowed. If further revisions are required, it's likely that it will just be rejected. Before we get too much further, let's look at the most common types of reviews typically used. The double-blind. The author doesn't know who's reviewing, and the reviewers don't know who they are reviewing. This is probably the most unbiased, as the article stands on its own merit and not on the reputation of the author. You'll know this method when the author instructions say to submit a paper without names. The single-blind. The author doesn't know who's reviewing, but the reviewers know who the author is. There's a certain amount of risk here if the author has a reputation, either positive or negative. The reviewers could be influenced. And finally, open review. Reviewer comments and author replies are openly available for discussion prior to publication. This is becoming more common with open source publications. There's a lot of discussion on how valid it is compared to the more traditional double and single blind reviews. The big question when it comes to review is, what are the reviewers looking for when they do a review? There really is no simple answer. The standards that an article must meet to pass peer review varies from journal to journal, but there are some usual suspects. Typical qualities include high quality, accurate, logical, original, and meets the scope and standards of the journal, publisher, or field. In 8 Reasons I Accepted Your Article, editors from Elsevier, a major publishing house and host to the Science Direct database, describe what they're looking for when they are accepting or rejecting a manuscript. Some of the points included: provides new insight into important issues and is useful to decision makers, stimulates new questions and ideas, advances or proposes a new theory, applies methods that are appropriate, rigorous, and support the conclusions, and refers to previous research. The Journal of Gerontological Nursing states on its website, all submissions will be evaluated using the following criteria: the importance and relevance of the topic to gerontological nursing care, the generalizability of ideas, research findings, readability, concise, logical ordering of ideas, sound rationale for ideas, including background, adequate documentation of ideas, citation of recent and relevant literature, appropriateness of inquiry methods, including design, samples, instruments, and procedures, accuracy of content, and soundness of conclusions. Even though the journal is peer-reviewed, that doesn't mean all of it is reviewed. The following items might not be: editorials, opinions, letters, book reviews, and other non-article features. What is reviewed varies from journal to journal, so it's best to check the journal's peer review policy and/or publication information to be sure. Even then, it may be at the discretion of the editor. This is important as most, if not all, databases set peer review state at the journal level, not the article level. So if an unreviewed opinion from a peer-reviewed journal is found in a database, it may show as peer-reviewed when in fact it didn't go through the process. Let's look at some examples. Nature, International Journal of Science, states the following types of contributions to Nature research journals are peer-reviewed: articles, letters, brief communications, matters arising, technical reports, analysis, resources, reviews, perspectives, and insight articles. Correspondence and all forms of published correction may also be peer-reviewed at the discretion of the editors. Other contributed articles are not usually peer-reviewed. Nevertheless, articles published in these sections, particularly if they present technical information, may be peer-reviewed at the discretion of the editors. Relational Child and Youth Care Practice Journal states that it may include peer-reviewed contributions. Please notice that we say may include and specifically not the full contents of the journal. We will still continue to publish stories, case studies, thought pieces, experimental descriptions, and other forms of writing which are not peer-reviewed. In this way, we aim to strike a balance between the values of peer-reviewed articles and experiential voices from the field. On their website, they state each issue may include refereed articles that comply with acceptable academic standards and that peer review is available upon request. This information can be tough to find as most statements will focus on the articles and the peer review process, not on what they don't review. Examine peer review or submission policy for descriptions of what is and isn't peer reviewed. Another really good example is Canadian Nurse. In the masthead of the journal, it says featured articles have gone through peer review. But in reality, it's unclear which are the actual featured articles and if they have in fact gone through peer review. Alright, now we know what the peer review process looks like. Let's take a look at the publications. Publications can be generally grouped into 3 piles, each with its own characteristics. Newspapers and magazines are written by reporters, journalists, or staff copywriters. Often the authors will not be credited or identified. They are written for a general audience using plain language. They focus toward a specific demographic or interest. They have lots of glossy, eye-catching images, and possibly more photos than text. They have lots of advertising aimed at their audience. And the articles are unstructured and rarely have citation or references listed. The primary objective is to entertain, inform, persuade, or sell. Trade or professional journals are written by academics and/or professionals. Some articles may be written by staff copywriters. Few articles may go through a peer-reviewed process, although it's typically hard to determine which are reviewed, and it may not clearly state this. They are written for the practitioner or professional in the field, and assumes a knowledge of the field in order to understand its content. It's written in technical language using jargon specific to that field. Glossy images may be used in both to entice readers and to support the articles. Often will include regular featured articles such as a book review. Advertising is aimed at the practitioner or professional in the field, and articles may or may not be structured into this article format. There may be limited references if at all possible. The main goal of this journal is to provide news, commentary, or information on a particular trade or profession. Scholarly or academic journals are written by scholars and experts, highly educated and or associated with professional institutions such as hospitals and universities. The majority of the articles are reviewed by other experts, i.e. peer-reviewed. They're written for other scholars in the field and assume a high-level knowledge in that field to understand the content. It's technical and analytical language. There are limited images, typically only graphs or tables to support articles. There's limited advertising, and typically it's self-advertising for its own organization or publication. Articles are long and follow a structured format. There's lots of references to other peer-reviewed articles that support the research. This journal aims to share and provide original research or analysis. An important distinction should be noted here. Not all scholarly academic journals are peer-reviewed. The terms peer-reviewed and scholarly are not interchangeable, although they're often used as such. So this information is great if we have the physical journal in front of us. We can flip through and get a feel for the content. But what if we're just giving the article or a PDF? How do we know it's peer-reviewed? In most cases, it won't say peer-reviewed across the top. Knowing what we know about the different types of journals, we can ask some questions. Does the author have credentials or affiliations with hospitals or universities? Peer-reviewed articles are written by experts and they're going to be highly educated. If the author doesn't have credentials, it probably isn't peer-reviewed. Does the article contain original research or analysis? If the content has the intention to persuade, sell, entertain, inform, or report, it probably isn't peer-reviewed. Is the article structured, having an abstract method and so on? And how long is it? Scholarly articles have a particular format. If the article isn't following that standardized structure, it probably isn't peer-reviewed. They also tend to be quite long. In some cases, the references alone might take up an entire page. Is the article technical in nature and may require specialized education or training to understand? Scholarly articles are written for professionals and experts in the field. Articles written in plain language or aimed at a general public are probably not peer-reviewed. Are there citations or references? Articles that don't have references to back up their claims are probably not peer-reviewed. You may have noticed I was saying probably not peer-reviewed. These answers are generalizations. It really does depend on the publication. There are always exceptions to the rule. That being said, if you said yes to all the questions on the previous slide, there's a pretty good chance that article you have in hand is a scholarly article, but that still doesn't mean it's peer-reviewed. All peer-reviewed articles are scholarly, but not all scholarly articles are peer-reviewed. So how do you know it's peer-reviewed or not? To be sure we have a peer-reviewed article, we have to go back to the publication and look for information about its peer review practices. Check the physical journal. Look at the masthead. This is the publication information that's typically found in very tiny print opposite the table of contents. Look in a couple of issues. It's not always published in every issue to save space. Look for key phrases such as "this journal is refereed" or "peer-reviewed." Some journals will indicate which articles are peer-reviewed with icons on the table of contents. This information is going to be very brief to save space. Check the website. Often it will say peer-reviewed right on the first page. Publishers want to promote this feature to sell subscriptions. Look for information for authors, Write for Us, or other similar author-focused pages. Here you will find more detail about the publication's peer review process. Look in information about the journal. Again, they will want to promote that they peer review to give the journal more credibility. Here is where you're going to find a lot more information and detail. It's important to check both as things change. Back to picking on Canadian Nurse. If you have a slightly older issue in hand, it says that it has peer-reviewed articles. But looking forward, it's no longer peer reviewing. Take the time to double check. Okay, we know what a scholarly journal looks like. We can identify the characteristics of a peer-reviewed article. Now where can we find them? Let's look at a couple of the more popular databases you might be working with. On this slide, OneSearch gives us clear indicators on the results page of peer-reviewed articles. It also provides us with a filter to eliminate anything that doesn't have this tag applied. EBSCOhost also provides us with a filter to eliminate anything that doesn't have this tag applied. Please note that most EBSCOhost databases are included in OneSearch, but just in case you're searching one independently, this is good to know. Not all databases will have peer review filters and/or indicators. This could mean a couple of things. Depending on the topic, some databases do not have peer-reviewed content, and other databases will only have peer-reviewed content. There's also the possibility that the database just isn't sophisticated enough to have these types of features. You'll have to rely on knowing what they look like in the wild. Regardless of whether your database filters by peer review or not, you should always evaluate your sources. Does the article meet the criteria you would expect for a peer-reviewed article? Databases aren't 100% accurate, and they tend to assign peer-reviewed at the journal level, not the article level. Remember, not all articles in a journal are necessarily peer-reviewed. When in doubt, check the journal and make sure. The focus of this session was on peer review, but we can't finish without at least mentioning the trend or infestation of predatory publishing. The shift to making research more open access has had the unintended consequence of publishers shifting the way they do business. Now authors are expected to pay to publish their article as much as $3,000 to $5,000 per article. Predatory publishers see this as an opportunity to make money off young, inexperienced scholarly authors. They advertise that they will publish your article for $50 to $100 and offer an a la carte of many helpful services such as proofing, peer review, and more. If you didn't know any better, which one would you choose? So how does this affect you as a researcher? While most predatory journals don't find their way into databases, enough do. You may also encounter them if you are searching using Google Scholar or the web. They are not typically peer-reviewed, even if they say they are. They, therefore, are of questionable quality. They may be used to hide conflicts of interest. Authors could be purposefully using this publishing platform to hide fraudulent intent and sometimes completely wrong information. Note, many nonsense papers have been published if only to prove the poor publishing practices of these entities. And more so, they can be very hard to identify. So how do we identify them? Here's a couple of tips to look for. Is the journal published by a known publisher, such as Elsevier or Sage? Does the website look sketchy? Get familiar with what a typical journal and publisher website looks like. Is the scope multidisciplinary with many unrelated topics? Most publishers are focused to a particular field. You won't typically see astronomy, medical, and business smushed together. Does it state that its articles are indexed in the big databases? If you can check, do so. Does it have stated retraction policies? This is the journal's ethical standards. doesn't have verifiable contact information. Often you can only contact predatory publishers by an email that's just as sketchy as the website. Is the pitch for authors a little too good, too cheap and easy? If it's too good to be true, it probably is. Publishing is not a quick and easy process. Is there a bigger push to hand over your credit card than about content? Especially aimed at authors? This isn't typical. Look back at the guidelines of what a scholarly article looks like. Do the articles match that criteria? For more information about predatory publishing, check out the peer review guide and the page on predatory journals. We've reached the end. As part of the library's Lunch and Learn program, a guide has been created to accompany the content covered here today. Please visit the guide for more information on this topic. A direct link will also be added to the Lunch and Learn page on the library's website. Do you have more questions? Don't hesitate to contact us. You can contact the facilitator of this presentation by email, or go to the library's homepage and click the Ask Us button to open a chat with the reference desk. Thank you for attending. Please check the webpage for more information about other Lunch and Learn sessions. New web videos will be added weekly, and live presentations will continue in fall 2020.